high intensity versus high volume, the great debate. I did a couple of videos talking about Mike Menzer, and I'm not someone who's going to tell you that HIIT doesn't work. Clearly, it works. I mean, we have great examples. Look at Dorian Yates. Now, I have stated, I think that Dorian Yates actually did it better than Mike Menzer. So if you read Heavy Duty and then you read, Blood and Guts, I do think Dorian Yates probably actually had a better approach to it. But that's not to say that both don't work. Both work. And the same thing is true of high volume versus high intensity. Both work. The debate that we have to have here is which one is better. This is a weird thing to discuss if you haven't experienced both. If you have experienced both, this will make perfect sense to you, and I'm going to dive into it here. The reality is, high volume works better because most people don't have the capacity, whether it's mental or physiological, psychological, neurological, whatever it is, to do high intensity training. This is just the reality of the situation, okay? A lot of people don't have it in them to truly push a set to absolute failure. When was the last time you saw someone at the gym doing back squats to the point where they had to lower the bar down to the safety pins and crawl out from underneath the bar? Most people quit. This is just the reality of the situation when it gets uncomfortable. A great example is, Brad Schoenfeld always talks about the importance of training to failure. Go watch the video of Brad Schoenfeld training with John Meadows, and let me know if you think Brad took a single set to failure. He's doing reps, and they're not even slowing down. He's not even straining, and he goes, oh yeah, that one was to failure. Then you watch John take a set to failure, and John takes a set to fucking failure. Now, this is not to bash Brad. This is to say that Brad is normal. The average person, right, doesn't have it in them to push past that point where it's discomfort. They don't have it in them to push to the point where they truly hit actual failure. Then you have someone like John, who not only hits failure, but then does, intensifiers like, forced reps, partial reps. Watch that video of Tom Platz doing leg extensions, and it's barely moving by the end. He is giving everything he has left. That we're not even talking about just like, oh, he can't complete a full rep anymore. Dude, he's doing the part where he's just basically just the bottom of the motion, just a little tiny bit of motion, and he's still trying to go. Most people don't have it in them to do that. How many of you out there have done a set of push-ups to the point where when you did the last one, you literally just collapsed to the ground and then couldn't get up, and you were unable to even lift your arms up? I've done that, okay? Very few people will push to that level. Most people will stop. They'll be like, that's failure because it's hard. They stop because it gets hard. So therefore, just speaking from a practical application standpoint, high volume tends to work better for people because they aren't, well, Jesus, I'm fucking crazy. And so most people aren't crazy. Most people aren't going to do a set of squats to absolute failure where they get pinned underneath the bar. I've done that. It didn't go real well either sometimes. One time I was doing box squats to failure. I had 295 and I was trying to do a set of at least 20. So I was shooting for 20 and I got to the 17th rep, and on 18 I got pinned to the fucking box. And I didn't have safety pins. So how do you think that went? It didn't go real well. Didn't go real well. I had to ditch that bar and try to get out from underneath it. I'm lucky I didn't injure myself, okay? The point being, I truly hit failure. My butt went down on rep number 18, and I could not get off the fucking box. Couldn't do it. I'm by myself. I'm by myself in my garage. I have no one to come help me. I don't have spotters. That was dumb, okay? Similarly, maybe you don't want to do that on a bench press because you pin yourself to the fucking bench. That's dumb. There are definitely situations where you shouldn't train to failure, like you're training in your garage by yourself. But that's a lesson that you learn. And then you go, holy shit, that was really dumb. I'm not going to do that a second time. And so I've never made that mistake again. The next time I did box squats, I was like, yo, I called my brother up and I was like, I need you to come over here and be my spotter because I don't want to do this a second time. Okay? All right, so that's why high volume tends to work better for people, but obviously both work. And so if you're capable of doing high intensity is a fantastic way for you to train. Now, here's my thoughts on this though, and this is a big one. Let's look at low intensity versus high intensity in terms of running. I'm sure you've heard people talking about this zone 2 cardio shit. The reality is, look at the work of Steven Seiler. Elite athletes avoid zone 2. They don't do it. I know Peter Attia tells you to do zone 2. Read the work of Steven Seiler. They're mostly zone 1. They're predominantly zone 1. In fact, almost all of their training is zone 1. And so a lot of people will jump on this low intensity thing and they'll find that they make massive progress. Yes, this makes sense. They've been doing high intensity or they've been doing moderate intensity, right? Training medium. You should pay attention to Charlie Francis, the high-low idea, right? So you either train high or train low. You don't train medium. Medium is a t-shirt size. So in any case, moving forward with this, it's the same thing I do with my guys. I either have them run at a really easy pace or I have them do sprint work. Why? Because we develop maximal speed or we develop an aerobic base, but we don't fuck around in the middle. Now, looking at this, if you have been doing low intensity for a long period of time and then you suddenly switch to a high intensity program, you will make tons of progress. It's a new stimulus. If you've been doing high intensity for a long time and you switch to low intensity, you'll make tons of progress. It's a new stimulus. The same thing is true of training with weights. If you have been doing a high volume program and you switch to a high intensity program, you will make a ton of progress. Why? Because it's a new stimulus. And if you've been doing high intensity and you switch to a high volume program, you're going to make a ton of progress because it's a new stimulus. So my suggestion to you is this: run a high volume program or a high intensity program. It doesn't matter, but we're going to use high and volume as the first example here because you're just going to reverse it. Okay? Run a high volume program, and whenever things slow down and you get stale and you plateau, switch to a high intensity program. Then run that high intensity program for a while, and when that stalls and you start to plateau, switch back to high volume. Yeah, it really is that simple. This is why I tell people all the time, like, I don't buy into this bullshit about rep ranges. I don't. I got stronger doing sets of 20. I got stronger doing sets of 5. I used to do sets of 10 and I got stronger. That's interesting. Wait. Yeah, and then I've also done nothing but singles, and I got stronger doing that too. So, why would you hone in on just one rep range and say it has to be 8 to 12 all the fucking time? That's stupid. You should train all rep ranges. But the point to this, you don't train all rep ranges at the same time. You don't come in and say, I'm going to do heavy singles today followed by sets of 20. No, you don't do that. That would be dumb. What you do is you rotate things. So maybe for a few weeks, you're doing sets of 20, then you do sets of 10, then you do sets of 5, and then you do sets of, 2 and 3, real heavy. And then you go back up again. You don't just jump 2 to 3 back to 20. You go from 2 to 3 back to 5, back to 10, back to 20, and back up and down again. Okay? That's one way of doing it. You could go right back to 20s. You could. I'm not telling you not to. I'm just saying, for me, I tend to oscillate from high to low and then back up to high, okay? That's what I prefer to do because I find that if I jump straight from, doubles and triples to doing sets of 20, I feel like absolute shit because it has a cardio demand there. Doing a set of 20 is cardio. Whether or not you want it to be, you are going to be breathing hard. Better way for you to get there, okay, is to increase your 2s and 3s to 5s, 5s to 8s, then to 10s, then 12s, then 15s, and then maybe 20s, because then you built that back up again, all right? Can you jump straight from doubles to 20s? Sure you can. It's just going to be fucking miserable. And that's why I don't do that, because I don't like, why make myself miserable if there's another way for me to do it where it's, I'm going to develop it back up again. So you work the reps back up, okay? This is no different than how I talk with people about, maybe pick a weight. You're going to say 225 and you're going to try to add reps every week. Okay? And then you do that for a while, and then you say, okay, now for a few weeks, I'm going to try to add weight every week. So I'm going to go 225, 235, 245, 255, right? Same fucking concept. We're just going to apply it now, where we're going to change programs. We're going to go from a high volume program to a high intensity program. Then we're going to go back to a high volume program and back to a high intensity program. This is not that hard of a concept. This is common sense. The point that I'm sharing with you here is whatever you're not doing, when you switch to that, it's a new stimulus to your body. You're going to see a jump in performance. So personally, if you want my opinion on what you think you should do, try to do high volume or high intensity, I think you should do both. But obviously you can't do both at the same time. You can't do high intensity and high volume at the same time. That wouldn't make sense, because if it's intense, you can't do a lot. And if it's high volume, then it can't be incredibly intense either. Okay, this is like saying, let's measure intensity in terms of 1 rep max. If it is your 1 rep max, you're not going to do a lot of volume with your 1 rep max. It's a 1 rep max, meaning you're going to do one fucking rep. You're not going to do a set of 20 with your 1 rep max. Okay, so you can't do high intensity and high volume at the same time, just by definition. The point that I'm trying to share here is that changing things around, though, is a new stimulus to your body. Yes, you've been doing back squats, okay? And now when you change from doing sets of 20 and you make it sets of 5, it's still a back squat versus a back squat, but it's going to feel like a totally different workout to your body. And that's where I would tend to go with these things. I would tell you that if you're capable of doing high intensity, then do cycles of high intensity. Do 8 to 12 weeks of high intensity, 8 to 12 weeks of high volume, and switch it back and forth. That's how I would approach it. That's what I think would be best for you in terms of getting the most out of things, because you're not letting yourself get stale, so you're changing the stimulus, okay? But for a lot of people, this is just the reality, a lot of people can't do high intensity. They just don't have it in them, whether it's psychological or neurological, to take a set to true failure. And so for those people, they're going to do better on a high volume program. That's why you see the majority of people doing high volume programs. Look at the majority of the Olympia guys. Most of them are doing high volume programs. Why? Because a lot of people just don't have it in them to go to absolute failure. And if they do, they can't do it frequently. Maybe 1 out of every 10 workouts you go to absolute failure. That means the other 9 are going to be high volume workouts, because you just don't have it that day. Most of us have a life outside of this. You're not just, sitting on the couch playing video games, eating and sleeping outside of the gym. I had a long day today. What time is it? Jesus. I've been working for, 8 hours now. And now I'm going to go start my workout. I'm not fresh. Mentally, I'm not oh man, I'm just ready to go. So I'm not going to try to take my bench presses to failure today. But on a day where I've had an easy day and I feel fresh and I get into the gym, yeah, sure, why not? I'll put 225 on the bar and rep out. Okay? I'm not going to do that today. And I think that there's something to be said about just doing different things on different days. I think there's something to be said about you changing your program. I think that there's something to be, there is a value to high intensity training, and there's a value to high volume training. And I think that you would be wise to get the benefits of both. This is like people that ask you, should you squat or should you deadlift? And it's do both. Should I do curls or rows? Both. I never understand these questions. People are like, well, if you could only do one exercise for the rest of your life. Yeah, but you can't. Okay, because if I have a barbell and I can do clean and jerk, then I can also do snatches and I can also do deadlifts and I can also, yes, you don't have a squat rack. That's fine. There's still a million fucking things you can do with a barbell. So, that's a dumb question. What would you do if you could only do one exercise? I would do as many different things as I possibly could. Then that's the answer to everything. Should you do low intensity cardio or high intensity cardio? Do both. Do both. This is people that think you can only do HIIT. And it's well, no, you can also do low intensity some days. Some days you just don't feel like, I just don't feel like doing fucking sprints today. Oh, but I can chill out on the Airdyne for 40 minutes and listen to a podcast. It's still getting work in. This obsession with everything being optimal all the time, I think it actually gets in people's way. I think that you're actually better off changing things frequently. This is like having some variety in your diet. You know, you eat nothing but chicken and rice all the time, which I'm all in favor of, but like maybe throw some vegetables or a piece of fruit in there every once in a while. Radical concept, I know. You know, maybe have some beef, maybe have some fish. You know, I make sure I eat fish at least once a week, minimum, usually at least twice a week. But I make sure it's in there a minimum of at least one meal where I have fish, okay? You should do that. It's good for you to have some variety. Anyways, that's the whole point behind this. High volume or high intensity, both work. Both work. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that one's better than the other. They're not. They're just better at different times, better under different circumstances. And, you know, if you're intelligent, you will utilize both strategies so that you can get the most out of your body.